She's like, go ahead, I dare you. How's your experience so far?
It's fabulous. I do like it.
Should we do this again in 2 years at CHOP? We've already had the Italian handshake. We're 2 years, we'll be in CHOP. So we're super excited about that.
That's good. We're going to build a whole new building.
Are we? Stacy Hubbard's already planning another scientific meeting for there, too. So we have the okay. I'd like to introduce Binita Kamath from Children's Hospital Sick Kids in Toronto. She's going to be talking about GALA.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It's so lovely to be here. I have to say, this is the best meeting we've ever had. It just is everywhere scientifically, meeting all the families, having Roberta and Cher guide us, sometimes push us, and it is spectacular. We felt that it was important to talk about this new database that has been established. And David alluded to the Children Network, which has now amassed a little over 300 patients with Alagille syndrome. And that is a database where we're collecting data prospectively. So by that, I mean, if you're enrolled in that study, every time you go for a study visit, your data gets entered. That's a very powerful tool in research. But it is limited by the number of centers that are in that NIH-funded network. Okay? So you can answer some good questions, but what we really felt was that what we needed was an opportunity to study things bigger. Now, I'm also not going to take credit for this. I'll tell you where this came from. A few years ago, Kira Kennedy, who people will remember, who worked with Mike. Did Mike leave the room? He's getting a shout-out, and he left the room. So Mike Gray and Kira Kennedy, who really were part of Lumina, who inspired this intestinal bile acid inhibitor drug that is in clinical trials at the moment, who started that clinical trial process. They came to me a few years ago and said, we need a global study of Alagille syndrome. So I'm not taking credit for it. This is a true partnership with industry. And then they fundraised for it, and they gave money to the Alagille Alliance, and the Alagille Alliance were able to partner with us, not just financially, but really more than that, to partner with us to really think about setting up this study. And so that's why I have to give a big shout out to Roberta and Cher, because they have really been instrumental in helping us put this study together. And so the idea was that we wanted to have a global initiative to create an international database of clinical, genetic, and laboratory data. And this is retrospective data, meaning we're going to centers and we're asking them for all the information that they have on patients with Alagille syndrome. So it's going back a little bit in time, but that's the way that you can do data collection when you want to go to a larger number of centers. This database captures information from children and young adults with Alagille syndrome all the way to the age of 30. That's ideal. I'm going to be honest with you. At the moment, it's mostly pediatric centers, so we're getting information probably to the age of about 20 or so, depending on how long people follow our patients. But we would like to engage more adult liver doctors so we can get some more adult information. And really, our tagline is that we're looking beyond the liver. We absolutely care about the liver. We're liver doctors, but we care about heart, kidney, vascular, bones. So we're collecting really comprehensive amounts of information, and we're blowing this open. This is a global study. And then a new thing that's coming that I'm going to talk about at the end is that we're really interested in a patient-reported study as well, where we're going to try and capture what matters most to patients and their families about mental health issues and transition issues, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So why is it needed? So why should I not just be happy with the older studies that we have, or this 300 patient data set that we have through the Children Network? Well, some of the really older studies from which we give information in clinic lacked genetic testing to confirm diagnoses. They had mixed diagnosis patients. A lot of current research initiatives really only focus on the liver disease and Alagille syndrome, and we know that we need to look beyond the liver. And there's really limited research in adolescents and young adults. Now, we made these slides before this morning, but this morning really highlighted again for us even more how much we realize that that's a big gap, and we would like to address it with this initiative. So what are our exact objectives? To determine the global prevalence and geographic distribution of Alagille syndrome, to characterize the natural history and long-term outcomes of children and young adults with Alagille syndrome, and to determine the frequency and clinical spectrum of heart, kidney, and vascular involvement. And also to collect growth data, because we know big gap. We need an Alagille-specific growth curve. I'm sure lots of you have suffered with not knowing really how well your kid is growing because you're trying to plot your child on a quote-unquote regular growth curve, and is it really applicable to Alagille syndrome? So how does this study work? This is different because you don't have to be at a particular site. Any site is eligible, but it's the physicians that have to input the data. Participating centers review medical records of Alagille syndrome patients that are followed at their institution, and it's all manner of clinical information, eye, skeleton, heart, kidney, and any vascular findings are entered into a secure database at your center. All right, and then we can access that data from Toronto. That data is de-identified, so it's private, and only approved individuals can access that data. So if you're a physician, they have to get ethical approval at their site, they put the data into the database, and then only approved people can access it. It's not going to be an open resource. And that database is going to be managed from Toronto. It's managed by myself, Shannon, who's in the back. Shannon, stand up. Yes, you have to stand up, Shannon. So Shannon is phenomenal. She is on the phone helping sites at all manners of hours because of time difference to get them up and running so they can learn from different countries about how to enter data into this database. And then we have this phenomenal statistician. Her name's Bettina Hansen, not Binita, Bettina. I know it's weird, but Bettina Hansen is really the premier liver statistician for all liver studies probably worldwide at the moment. So we were really lucky to have her work to help us to do the statistical analyses. Currently, we have 66 centers participating from 27 countries. So I'm really excited about this. I just think, wow, we've never been able to get such a global view of Alagille syndrome. Most of what we've seen has been either very European-based or very North American-based, and it's been particular types of centers. Here we've got some centers. We have a center from China who gave us 200 patients. But we also have smaller centers from Eastern European that have given us maybe 5 patients. And that's okay. We're trying to understand Alagille syndrome all over the world. And so it's about inclusivity. So this is, I think it's going to go very well. This is just a little bit of idea of the type of information that we get. We get liver biopsy reports, we get MRI reports, all kinds of matter. We really ask, a lot of the time we ask for the actual report of the liver biopsy so that we can look at it ourselves after, because if you just ask people to enter things in free text, they may choose at the local site which bits to give you, which may, so the best way to collect data is to get the original report and then we can extract what we need from it. So, to date, we have more than 800 patients in this database. There's never been such a large collection of Alagille syndrome patients collected, and we're really excited about this. We've got lots of things to do. We're looking at the laboratory data. We're looking at how lab values change over time. We're going to be reviewing lots of head MRI and abdominal MRI and CT reports to look at vascular anomalies, and we're going to be looking at long-term height and weight so we can eventually make an Alagille-specific growth curve. So, all those data, we have about 800 patients in right now. We've just looked at baseline characteristics and analysis, and we have submitted an abstract to the main liver meeting, which will happen in November. Because we've submitted the abstract, I'm not allowed to talk about what's in that yet, which I'm sure you all really want to know, but we will definitely be able to talk about it. But I'm going to give you a snippet of something at the end so that you don't feel that I cheated you or anything like that, but there will be something. I do want to talk a little bit about this. So this is a study that's coming down the line. It's not ready quite yet. I think, what do you think, Shannon, 6 months? I just gave you a deadline, Shannon. In 6 months, this study is going to happen. And this is where we really need you. So that everything that I discussed right previously, your physicians have to input those data. This is going to be coming down the line to all of you, and I really hope that you'll be able to help us with it. So what do we want to do? We want to know about health outcomes as reported by patients and their families. And we want to understand the effects of Alagille syndrome and treatments on patients' quality of life and well-being. There have been 2 studies of quality of life and Alagille syndrome. They're not bad, they're pretty good, but we have not really done a deep look at this, and I think as I hear from our patients, as I hear from our families, there are big gaps here. There's lots of things we don't know. And we need to use validated patient-reported outcomes. So not just the informal conversations that we have or asking you guys to email us. We need to use validated measures so we can compare the impacts of living with Alagille syndrome with other chronic diseases. I'm interested. Is it more burdensome to live with Alagille syndrome than it is with cystic fibrosis? I don't know. But if we use validated tools, we can approach this in an academic way, and then we can advocate for resources if we can do this research. So why is it important? We want to move towards patient-centered care. It's not what we want, it's what's important to the whole community. And we think that doing this study will be able to gain unique information from the patient's perspective that can't be obtained just from looking at lab values or CT reports. So hopefully we're going to attack the gaps in Alagille syndrome, one, from the scientific, medical knowledge that we're accruing in the first study, and then with this part, hearing from you to fill these gaps. We're really interested in psychosocial outcomes in adolescents. We hear time and time again at the time of transition, when patients are transitioning to adulthood, is a really difficult time in Alagille syndrome because you're cared for by this pediatric center where we all care about you deeply. We care about the family. We know you. You've known us for 18 or 19 years. And then suddenly, boom, you get dropped into the adult world. It's a really scary time for many patients with chronic diseases, but of course here we care a lot about Alagille syndrome, and we really want to target that age group. And we're going to be sending out surveys. We're looking at quality of life, educational, occupational attainment, and mental health, particularly in the 16 to 24-year-old group, because that's usually the crucial group in transition where things don't go well. So just a little bit more, we'll be doing self-reported psychosocial outcomes and to try to find factors that may contribute to those poor psychosocial outcomes. You'll be sent a link to online questionnaires to eligible participants through the Alliance, and then you'll be asked the questions. The questionnaires are anonymous. There'll be no personal information on them, but we feel that you'll be able to do it. It's going to take, how long is it going to take, Shannon, to do a questionnaire? 25 minutes before. All right, so it's like as long as one episode of something. So if you can forego one episode on Netflix of, I don't know, Queer Eye or something, and watch this and do this instead for us, then that'll be incredibly valuable. The other thing that we really want to delve into is sleep disturbance. We think this is crucial. We think that itching for sure disturbs sleep, but sleep leads to daytime sleepiness, fatigue, and that leads to decreased health-related quality of life. This has definitely been identified in patients with psoriasis, eczema, and we know that it's important. So we want to really look at sleep problems as well, and this will all be part of this. I think this is also going to be a crucial component of evaluating new drugs in the future. So having this information will help inform us about how to monitor this when we're evaluating new drug therapies. And that's just more about the sort of the details of what we will do there. Same thing, there'll be online questionnaires that we will send you that will ask about patients' medical history, sleep patterns, and quality of life. So how can you help with GALA? Well, one is to build awareness about GALA. Shannon is there in the back. If you have any questions, please ask her. And then when you go to your next clinic appointment, ask your physician, have you entered our data into GALA? Can you please do it? Because the database grows, we have more information, we're going to be able to do a better job of the analysis. So ask your primary liver doctor or your GI doctor, and then share our contact information with them if they don't have it. Shannon will give you extra cards if you want, you can contact her. And if you have your doctor's email address, if you happen to have that, give that to Shannon and she will chase them down. So please do that. And then, of course, the questionnaires as you get them in the next 6 months. So as I said, I couldn't give you really detailed information about what we've done so far with the baseline data analysis in GALA, and I would be able to do that next time I'm here, but I wanted to give you a teaser of something that we have done. I changed this, Shannon doesn't even know this, I changed this morning because I heard how important growth is to lots of families. So I wanted to show you that this is sort of building off the infrastructure of GALA, but we did do a study that was actually presented at the European Pediatric GI meeting just 2-3 weeks ago in Glasgow, and we presented these data which give you an example of what we can do when we have a bigger data set for Alagille syndrome. And this was done in conjunction with Toronto, with CHOP, and I have a very talented fellow who's actually faculty from Belgium, Koen, who's very interested in nutrition, and he wanted to look at growth trajectories in Alagille syndrome. So I'm going to give you just some early teasers, and this is the foundational work. When we get more growth charts from GALA, we will be able to make a growth curve, but I want to show you what we can do. So we know that growth is impaired in Alagille syndrome. That's not news to any of you. But in the past, some people have sort of considered it, well, it's just part of the syndrome, isn't it? It's just part of the syndrome. You don't really, we want to make sure that we address fat-soluble vitamins, but the kids are going to be small. But that's really hard to assess. And if you don't have a condition-specific growth curve, you don't know is this amount of small okay, or is this amount of small okay? It's hard to know. One study that we did a few years ago, we were looking at outcomes after liver transplantation and Alagille syndrome. Now, we compared kids with Alagille syndrome to kids with biliary atresia. So as you would expect, at the time of transplant, children with Alagille syndrome were smaller than children with biliary atresia. Okay? And after transplant, kids with biliary atresia grew better. That's fine. They were bigger. But what we saw also, and it is shown in the two curves here, is that the catch-up growth, the growth velocity, the speed with which kids grew, was better in Alagille syndrome than in biliary atresia. So that's really important. So sure, biliary atresia kids are bigger and they stay bigger, but you get better catch-up growth post-liver transplantation in Alagille syndrome. So what that means to me is that it is worth really paying attention to growth because we can make a difference with medical interventions. We shouldn't, as a community, just say, Alagille syndrome, that's why they're small. We can do things to make that growth better. So yes, they may be small, but they don't need to be as small as they are. And if we have growth curves, we're going to be able to make a difference with that. So what have we done? This initial study with this infrastructure has been to investigate growth patterns from the age of birth to 5, and to maybe try to start thinking about what things are influencing growth. We had a big cohort of about 400 children, but there was lots of missing data, and this is one of the problems with these types of big data studies. We ended up with 142 kids, 40 from Canada, 100 from CHOP, and looked at their growth. And we basically had, in that 142 children, we had about 400 different height and weight measurements. And this is what it looks like. So what you're basically doing is you're taking all of the growth curves of individual children, and then you use statistical modeling to try and look at what a growth curve would look like. These are the weights in the first year of life. And it's hard. Do I have a pointer? This is a pointer. This is my pointer. Oh, no. Okay, but if you can look in the upper panel here, all the individual black lines in the weight, and there's weight on the y-axis and age across the bottom. All the individual black lines are individual patients and their growth in the first 5 years of life. And the curve in the middle is the beginning of what a growth curve would look like for Alagille syndrome. You have to use statistical tests to try and merge all that data together. The blue is boys, the reddish color is girls. It's fairly similar, but what you can see is in the first few months of life, in all kids with Alagille syndrome, growth dips down, and then it seems to catch up. It doesn't catch up to quote-unquote normal levels on a CDC or a WHO growth curve, but it does seem to regain. But it seems like up to the first 6 months of life, that's where growth is the worst, so we probably need to pay the most attention. Similar with height, but height seems to have less of a catch-up. So what we could see just from this first analysis of this type of big data set is that weight deficit is definitely present at birth in more than half of kids with Alagille syndrome. You know this already. And children with Alagille syndrome grow below the reference charts compared to the typically developing children. But weight tends to decrease further than their already impaired growth in the first 3 to 6 months of life, and then there's a period of catch-up. And the catch-up in height occurs later. So this is the type of database, when we grow this, it gets bigger, we will be able to come up with a growth curve. So that's really what I just wanted to give you a teaser of what kinds of things we can do. So please get your physician to put your data into GALA, because the bigger it is, the more kind of work like this we'll be able to do. Thank you. Any questions?